Okay, we are going to pick up reading A Long Walk to Water. We have read chapter 1 and 2 of this book, so we will begin chapter 3. But just as a review, let's talk about some of the stuff we talked about in A Long Walk to Water. So, what is the setting of this book? Where is it set?
In Sudan.
In Sudan, it's a certain place in Sudan. Do you remember where that is?
Southern.
Yeah, in southern Sudan, that's right. Our two main characters, what are their names?
Naya and Salvia.
Salva, very good. Naya and Salva. How old are Naya and Salva, Stone?
11 years old.
11, yeah, that's right. Let's see. So what's going on with Naya so far in the story? Yes, Jay, go ahead.
She is walking with like a big jug.
That's right. She's walking with a big jug, right? Do you remember she's going to a pond, I think. Do we know, how long did it say it took her to walk to the pond? Go ahead, Jay.
Half a morning.
Yep, half the morning, that's right. And there's something wrong with her foot. How'd she get hurt? She stepped on a what?
Thorn.
On a thorn, that's right. Okay, and then Salva, what's going on with him, Stone?
He's running away from the war.
That's right. And where was he? He was in his classroom, right? And who told him to run?
His teacher.
His teacher, very good. And did she tell him to run towards his house, or where'd she tell him?
Away from the war and like into the bush.
Into the bush. Okay. What's the bush?
Like the forest.
That's right. It's like the forest. And she said into the bush, but she said even farther than that. She said run until you find what?
Safety.
Safety. Very good. Is he with anybody? Yes, Jade?
No, the group he is with left him.
Yeah, that's right. He was by himself, and then he found a group, and then what we're going to pick up is he has just woke up and he's realized that the whole group has gotten up and left him, and he's all by himself again. So they're 11 years old, and they're having some rough times, right? Okay, we're going to start reading chapter 3. Southern Sudan, 2008. The smudge on the horizon gained color as Naya drew nearer, changing from hazy gray to olive green. The dirt under her feet turned to mud, then sludge, until at last she was ankle deep in water. There was always so much life around the pond. Other people, mostly women and girls, who had come to fill their own containers, many kinds of birds all flap and twitter and call, herds of cattle that had been brought to the good grazing by the young boys who looked after them. So the young boys are bringing the herds of cattle for the good grazing. Why do you think the good grazing is near the pond? Go ahead.
Because it's more fertilized and more, more better soil.
Okay,
it's by
why?
The water.
Because it's by the water, that's right.
It's called slit.
Okay, awesome. Naya took the hollowed gourd that was tied to the handle of the plastic container. She untied it, scooped up the brown muddy water, and drank. It took 2 gourdfuls before she felt a little cooler inside. Naya filled the container all the way to the top. Then she tied the gourd back in place and took the padded cloth donut from her pocket. The donut went on her head first, followed by the heavy container of water, which she would hold in place with one hand. With the water balanced on her head and her foot still a little sore from the thorn, Naya knew that going home would be longer than coming had. Why is it going to take longer to go home, Stone?
Because her foot hurts, and it's gonna make her limp and not be able to walk as fast.
Okay. Why else?
Because of the heavy water.
Yeah, that's right. Even though Naya knew that going home would take longer than coming had, but she might reach home by noon if all went well. What do you think she meant by if all went well, Jade?
So, if the water tipped over, she would have to, stop and go back. And then, if she even hurt herself even more, then...
Okay. Yeah, that's right. Because balancing a big jug of water on your head probably isn't easy, right? Okay, now let's pick up with Salva's story. Southern Sudan, 1985. The tears were hot in Salva's eyes. Where had everyone gone? Why had they left without waking him? He knew the answer. because he was a child who might tire easily and slow them down and complain about being hungry and cause trouble somehow. I would not have been trouble. I would not have complained. What will I do now? Salva took a few steps to see what he could see. On the far horizon, the sky was hazy from the smoke of the bombs. About 100 paces in front of him, he could see a small pond. Between the pond and the barn was a house, and yes, a woman sitting in the sun. Holding his breath, he crept closer until he could see her face clearly. The ritual scar patterns on her forehead were familiar. They were Dinka patterns, which meant that she was from the same tribe as Salva. Salva let out his breath in relief. He was glad that she was not Nur. The Nur and the Dinka had a long history of trouble. No one, it seemed, was sure where Nur land ended and Dinka land began, so each tribe tried to lay claim to the areas richest in water. Over the years, there had been many battles, large and small, between the Dinka and the Nur. Many people on both sides had been killed. This was not the same as the war that was going on now between the rebels and the government. The Dinka and the Nur had been fighting each other for hundreds of years. So, what were they fighting over, Stone?
The rich land,
The rich land. Why was that land rich?
because it had more nutrients for growing crops and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And what's the richness? What helped make it rich?
Water.
The water. That's right. The women looked up and saw him. Salva flinched at her glance. Would she be friendly to a stranger? Would she be angry with him for spending the night in her barn? But at least he was not alone now, and that knowledge was stronger than the uncertainty about what the woman might do or say to him. He walked toward her. "Good morning, Auntie," he said with a trembling voice. She nodded at him. She was much older than his mother. He kept quiet, waiting for her to speak. "You must be hungry," she said at last. She stood and went into the house. A few moments later, she came back out and gave him 2 handfuls of raw peanuts. Then she sat down again. "Thank you, Auntie." Squatting on his haunches next to her, Salva shelled the nuts and ate them. He chewed every nut into a paste before he swallowed, trying to make each one last as long as he could. So that's the second time that Salva has called the old woman Auntie. Is she his aunt?
No.
No, you don't think she's his aunt, Stone? Well, why would he call her that?
Maybe that's just how they say, like, Miss from over there.
Okay.
From their culture.
From their culture. Jade, what do you think?
I think it's just like a greeting, since like everyone has a different greeting in the culture. Like some is howdy and some is hi.
Yeah. I think that's good. I think that it's definitely a familiarity. You know, it's a word saying, "Hey, I know you. We're from the same tribe," type thing. But definitely a cultural reference. The woman sat without speaking until he was finished. Then she asked, "Where are your people?" Salva opened his mouth to speak, but his eyes filled with tears again, and he could not answer. She frowned. "Are you an orphan?" He shook his head quickly. For a moment, he felt almost angry. He was not an orphan. He had a father and a mother. He had a family. "I was at school. I ran away from the fighting. I do not know where my family is." She nodded. "Bad thing, this war. What are you going to do? How will you find them?" Salva had no answer. He had hoped that the woman might have some answers for him. After all, she was the adult. Instead, she only had questions. Everything was upside down. Salva stayed in the woman's barn again that night. He began to make a plan. Maybe I can stay here until the fighting stops. Then I will go back to my village and find my family. He worked hard so she would not send him away. For 3 days, he fetched firewood from the bush and water from the pond. The pond was drying up. Each day it was harder to fill the gourds. During the daytime, Salva could hear the distant booming of artillery from the fighting a few miles away. With every shell that exploded, he would think of his family, hoping they were safe, wondering desperately when he would be with them again. On the 4th day, the old woman told him that she was leaving. She's leaving? Why do you think she might be leaving? Jay?
Because the water's running out and the war and all that bad stuff.
Okay, yeah, those are good guesses. You have seen that the pond is only a puddle now. Winter is coming and the dry season, and this fighting. She nodded her head in the direction of the noise. I will go to a different village near water. You cannot stay with me any longer. Salva stared at her as his panic arose. Why can't I go with her? The woman spoke again before he could ask aloud. The soldiers will leave me alone, an old woman on her own. It would be more dangerous for me to travel with you. She nodded her head in sympathy. I am sorry I cannot help you any more. Wherever it is you walk, just be sure to walk away from the fighting. So how do you think the woman felt? She's leaving him, leaving this kid all by himself. How do you think she feels about that?
Sad.
Sad. Why do you think she's sad?
Because she's leaving this poor kid with no one else. And she's, like, helped him for a few days now. And he doesn't have his family.
Yeah.
So she feels sad for him.
Well, why didn't she just take him with her?
Because it's really dangerous. Like, she might get killed and he might get killed if the guards see.
Okay. If they go together, the soldiers do. How do you think Salva feels? So.
Sad. Like, maybe like lonely.
Lonely. I think that's probably a really good description. Sad and lonely. Both of them are just kind of don't know what to do they? Salva stumbled back to the barn. What will I do? Where will I go? The words repeated themselves 1,000 times in his head. It was so strange. He had known the old woman for only a few days, but now he could not imagine what he would do when she was gone. He sat inside the barn and stared out, looking at nothing. As the light grew dimmer, the noises of evening began. The buzz of insects, the rustling of dry leaves, and another sound. Voices? Salva turned his head towards the sound. Yes, it was voices. Some people were walking toward the house. A small group, fewer than a dozen. As they approached, Salva took a sharp breath. In the fading light, he could see the faces of those nearest him. 2 of the men had patterns of V's shaped on their forehead. Dinka patterns again, the kind that were given to the boys in Salva's village as part of the ritual of becoming a man. These people were Dinka too. Could his family be among them? Okay. So there's new people coming. We know Salva's been left twice by the first group and then by the old woman. How do you think he feels with this new group of people approaching?
Excited, hopeful.
Okay. Hopeful? Why would he be hopeful?
Since, like, he knows that it's Dinka. It might be his family.
Might be his family, yeah. So he's hopeful for that, right?
Adulthood.
Yeah.
2 of them were.
Yeah.
And then.
Okay. Do you think he could feel anything else, Stone, other than hopeful?
Desperate.
Desperate, yeah. Do you think he's weary a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why would he be weary?
Because he hasn't seen his family in a long time.
Yeah. He's probably kind of scared to get his hopes up, right? Because the last groups of people that come, they've left him. So he's probably kind of weary if it's not his family that they're going to leave him again. So we will see what happens next in chapter 4.